So earlier this month, the federal government was on the brink of actually shutting down as the president, Senate Democrats, and House Republicans argued over how much money needed to be cut from this year's budget. Now, in the end, the three sides made an 11th-hour deal, but not everyone was actually happy with the plan. 59 GOP Congress members voted against the bill, arguing that it didn't cut enough from the budget, and that forced Speaker John Boehner to rely on Democrats to pass the plan. My next guest chose to vote yes, and now he is home explaining his decision to his constituents and also to us, He is, of course, Congressman Chris Gibson. He represents New York's sprawling 20th Congressional District that spans from Poughkeepsie to Lake Placid.
And then as far west as almost Binghamton.
Yes, so you have a lot of people to talk to while you're here. You actually are satisfied with this? Is that why you voted yes? Or are you wholly satisfied with the deal that was cut to keep the government open?
I think it's the first steps towards what is necessary in our country to restore fiscal responsibility. Look, I mean, we wanted to cut $100 billion from the president's mark. At the end of the day, we cut $79 billion from the president's mark, which was $39 billion from last year's 2010 spending levels. So, look, at the end of the day, we wanted to cut $100 billion. The president, as he said in the State of the Union address, wanted to freeze, cut zero. We got 79 out of 100. I'd say that's a pretty one-sided deal for us. It's not nearly what we need to do, but it's the first steps towards moving back towards a balanced budget. And notice how the conversation has changed. A year ago, we had some on the left that were talking about another $1 trillion jobs bill. We're not talking about that anymore.
Okay.
What we're talking about now is how we're going to cut so that we can move back towards a balanced budget.
But it wasn't pretty. I mean, it forced the speaker at the 11th hour to go back to your conference and sell you guys this deal, which there were people on the right who were not pleased. I mean, 59 people who did not vote with John Boehner is not a vote of confidence in the speaker who had to broker a deal. And you know, it took out these riders, these controversial riders that some Republicans wanted, like defunding Planned Parenthood, for example.
I think the important thing to remember is that we're in the first 100 days of this Congress. And we're going to continue to keep moving towards our target. As you see here in this chart that I brought, what we need to do is we need to go back to 2008 spending levels, because that's the last time that we were below 20% of gross domestic product. And in terms of federal spending in relation to GDP, most economists, regardless of party, will tell you that's a fiscally responsible level. And so we took some baby steps here in this budget resolution that closed the books on 2011. The other thing that's important to recognize is that was the work of the last Congress, and they left it to us. And we just finished that, and 24 hours later, we passed our budget resolution for 2012.
Before we get there, let me just ask you, would you have voted, were you upset that that rider was not there, for example? Because the Planned Parenthood rider was a sticking point, so would you have voted yes for that?
I'll tell you that if it had been in there with this, sure, I would have voted yes. But I wasn't going to shut down the government over that. I think we needed to get the best deal that we could possibly get, and 79 out of 100 billion is a good first step to keep the government running. I mean, we have servicemen and women that are out in Iraq and Afghanistan right now fighting for our freedoms. And the prospect of them not getting paid was wrong.
Well, maybe we shouldn't even have been talking about it at all. I mean, there were some people in that discussion who said, well, why are we even talking about perhaps shutting down the government over something that is so controversial, such a hot-button issue, and a flashpoint clearly that people are never going to agree on?
Well, I'll tell you that, the media tried to say that that was a big sticking point, but the policy writers were decided 24 or 48 hours before that. We were talking about, in the last 24 hours, we were talking about the spending, what was going to be cut. And at the end of the day, I think the American people got a deal that is the first steps towards what we need to do to move back towards a balanced budget.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Then you talked about the 24 hours later, the passage of the Paul Ryan bill, of course. Okay.
Well,
so
Republican. It's really the Republican budget.
It is a Republican, right. And then subsequently we see from the president a big speech about debt limits, about the need for bipartisan agreement on debt, about talking regarding entitlement programs, for example. Before we even get into the details of Paul Ryan's plan, and now the Republican budget plan, as you call it, do you believe that the Republicans forced the president to do what he did, put him onto the defensive, and made him have that discussion?
Well, look, I'm glad that he came out with a speech. He unveiled his budget in January. He gave a State of the Union address, and then 2 weeks later, he brought his budget forward. And the budget was, widely denounced. Even Democrats recognized it wasn't serious. And you just saw the press release 2 days ago from S&P concerned about whether or not we were going to be able to reach agreement and move back towards a balanced budget. putting a shot over the bow that if we don't take action in the next couple of years, we could potentially have our bond rating reassessed. That's very serious. So when the president came out and spoke, look, I was willing to read. If he was taking a mulligan, if he hooked the first one in the woods, the whole budget, and he took another ball out of his bag and said, I'll hit another budget, he hasn't resubmitted a budget. He gave a speech, but there's nothing behind it. There's no paper behind it.
There was some broad
Yeah.
ideological
Right.
standpoints. For example, he said, I am going to protect Medicaid and Medicare. He was quite strong in his rhetoric, saying that he felt that Republicans wanted to take the country backwards on those entitlement plans.
Well, that's not true at all. What we want to do is strengthen and preserve those programs. We'll talk about that in a second. But, if the president wants us to take seriously, if he wants to say, look, my first budget didn't make the mark, and I want to give a second budget so that I can get into the conversation now with the one that we just passed last week, then he needs to deliver it, because it's not enough just to make statements. I was willing to read the details of it. I read every word of the 72 pages of our budget proposal, and I read every word of the 30 pages of the CBO assessment of our budget proposal. And when I went to read the president's plan, there isn't one. And so if he wants us to take him seriously on that, he's going to have to come forward with a second budget.
Okay, well, he talked about debt and the need to address the country's ever-spiraling debt,
Yes.
right? So do you believe that the Republicans should, in fact, not try to hold the line on the debt ceiling? Do you believe that we should vote to raise the debt ceiling?
I think what we have to do is, look, I've gone to Congress. Our constituents have sent me there on a mission with 3 goals: to grow the economy and create jobs, to reduce federal spending, and to protect freedoms. So I will take seriously anything the president puts on the table if it's cutting spending and it's changing the way that we do business. So,
But what about raising the debt ceiling?
That's what I'm talking about. I want to see, it's going to have to be a package where the president agrees to spending cuts. Look, in this chart, look, I just want to show you.
Viewers aren't going to be able to see
Well,
this chart.
I want you to be able to see it, and
Okay.
hopefully the viewers
All right,
can
there,
see
hold
it.
it right up there.
Look, our spending is close to 26%. Federal spending in relation to GDP.
Okay.
This is reckless.
But if
he
we
has to reduce
default,
spending.
if we can't pay our debt
Right.
and we default and people won't invest in the country, that's a problem. You're not growing the economy that
That's
way.
right. We can avoid this if the president comes to the table with serious spending cuts and structural changes. What we need to do is get our spending back below 20% and then cap it. Now, the president said he's willing to cap, but he wants to cap at 23 to 24% of GDP. Federal spending in relation to GDP. You never change the trajectory. The president's budget, since he hasn't submitted another one, when you look out over the years to 2050, we end up with $120 to $125 trillion worth of debt. Whereas our plan is serious. It does take 26 years to get back to a balanced budget, but then we run surpluses, and by 2050, the debt is in half.
Okay, let's talk about.
And by the way, our plan will actually not only balance the budget, it actually moves us to surpluses and to paying off the debt.
Okay.
That's a big difference.
Before we run out of time, let's
Yeah.
talk about the Medicare piece of this plan, which is the piece that actually the Democrats are attacking the most. I mean, one of your colleagues, Anne-Marie Burkle, is the subject of dual radio ads right now that say that she voted yes, as you did,
Yes.
on the Ryan plan, which the Democrats say is going to end Medicare as we know it. That's the soundbite, end Medicare as we know it. And you say, no, that's not true. You also say you did not change your position because you believe that the Medicare plan, as Ryan is proposing it, is not a voucher proposal?
That's right. It's not. And listen, I'm opposed to vouchers, and I remain opposed to vouchers because we don't want to privatize this program. We don't want to have a situation where our government sends checks to senior citizens and just says you're on your own from there. That's what a voucher program would do. And that's unacceptable because I think what would end up happening is we'll end up with another bailout. We'll have seniors that get swindled. I mean, right now, all over our district, there are seniors that get mail all the time saying, the government's trying to take your Social Security, send us $100. Seriously, that's going on right now. There are all these scare letters. Send us $100 because we're going to protect your Social Security.
Yeah, but I think discussion about Medicare at all, I mean, most people think Medicare is great, but most people love it. I mean, Anthony Weiner wanted to have everybody have it, if I remember correctly.
Here's the issue. The opposition says that, that we're going to kill Medicare. Liz, the status quo kills Medicare. Look at the CBO's analysis. In 10 years, Medicare is going to be broke. We're trying to take action to preserve it and to strengthen it. And look at what we're doing. First of all, if you're a current senior, no change. If you're 55 years and older, no change. If you're 54 years and younger, what we're talking about doing is giving future seniors the same options that members of Congress have. We're talking about giving up to about a half dozen plans for them to choose from, future seniors. And when they choose it, then the government then will pay the premium. It's about $8,000 worth of premium to get that insurance. And then there's more, though. There's important points that are not being discussed. This is also income sensitive. You know, if you're on the poverty line, or if you're 150% of the poverty line, which for our district, when you get to senior citizen age, you're talking up to a third or 40%, you're going to be entitled to $7,800 additional dollars in a health savings account. That's important because that helps pay first. And look, how are we going to pay for that? Partially because the top 2% of wage earners, the top 2% of wealth, instead of having $8,000 worth of premium, they're going to get $3,500.
Okay, and also the president would like to tax those people, which of course the Republicans, the top earners, what the Republicans don't want to do. Now, here's the problem: we're out of time, unfortunately. And also, when you talk about the Paul Ryan budget, I'm not necessarily certain that as proposed, that the Democrats are going to go along with it. It's pretty clear that we're going to have another long negotiation process.
Well, we will.
Unfortunately, we're out of time because we have some other issues that I wanted to tackle. Hopefully, you will come back,
I'll look forward to that.
Because
Thanks for having me.
It is always good to talk to you.
Appreciate
Thanks very
you.
much.
Thank you very much.